At 10 o'clock, the entrepreneur and apprentice star, the fantastic Thomas Skinner, is live in the studio. Get your questions in now and your business ideas. Pitch your business idea straight to Thomas, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, after the debacle of America's departure from Afghanistan, should Joe Biden step down? That's the subject of the clash tonight. To tackle this question, I'm delighted to welcome two very top political names. Political commentator Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas, and live from Washington, USA, a friend of Joe Biden's, someone that's known him for many years, political journalist Jon-Christopher Bua. So, Greg, should the president step down?
Well, that's a tough one, Mark. As you know, first of all, great to be here on your show. I really appreciate it. But look, it's a different model in the U.S. You know, presidents don't resign because they've had a bad week, or in this case, one of the worst, humiliations in the history of, or the modern history of American presidents. So, as bad as it is, and as bad as this week was for Biden and for America and for the West, in other models in other countries, he would resign, and he should resign if that was the model. But look, this is not how the American system works. So I don't think he should, because it's just not set up that way. And by the way, if he did, we would have President Kamala Harris, and that would be even more of a disaster than President Biden has been.
What's your verdict on the events of the last few days and Biden's decision to withdraw in this manner, Greg?
Well, I don't think it could be much worse. I mean, he's ignored the advisors, both his foreign policy and his military advisors. He's blamed everybody except for himself. And notably, he hasn't really blamed the Taliban. He spent a lot of time on Monday in his speech talking about everybody that was at fault. President Trump, his three predecessors, that he mentioned quite deliberately, the Afghan army, the Afghan people that supported the Americans and the Brits for leaving or for not leaving sooner. The list was long of people that he blamed, and yet he never really talked about the Taliban, which I thought was interesting. And he surely didn't take any blame for himself, in spite of his one preemptive comment about the buck stops with me. But look, he spent a lot of time. He was very defiant, and he surely didn't actually take any blame for anything.
Right to blame Donald Trump, given the fact that it was the previous president who set in train the process of US forces leaving Afghanistan. It was Donald Trump's idea in the first place.
Yes, Mark, I mean, it's a good comment, but remember, the President Trump set that policy up along with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo with very deliberate conditions that had to be met. It was not unconditional. It was not waving the white flag, which is what Biden did in the last days or the last month, actually. It very much depended on conditions. And when the Taliban violated those conditions, they were punished for it, and they were bombed or whatever it was. That's why we maintained the force in Afghanistan. It's also why we kept the airport at Bagram, or the Bagram Air Force Base. So, that's not, I really can't call out Trump on that. And the second thing is, not that it matters at this point, but, Biden has overturned every policy of President Trump that he could possibly overturn, especially the ones that worked, which are particularly annoying. And yet he decides not to overturn this one. So I don't buy that. It was a false choice that he talked about last week. And look, he could have, there's a lot of options that he had. His military and foreign policy advisors gave him options. He turned them down, and he waved the white flag.
Jon-Christopher Bua, a week to forget for your pal Joe Biden.
A week to forget him?
A week to forget. A very, very challenging week for his presidency, potentially fatal politically.
Well, it is, and I'd like to forget the Helsinki meeting with Putin and Donald Trump. We'd all like to forget that. We'd also like to forget Mike Pompeo and Jared Kushner in Doha making a deal with the Taliban and not including the Afghan army, or even allowing the next president to have any information during the transition. This was a deal made, and you remember, Afghanistan goes way back. we remember to 1980 when the Mujahideen got rid of the Russians. Vladimir Putin has been dying to get the riches and the minerals of Afghanistan. And because Trump made a deal with the Taliban, and the mistake that Biden made was that he continued to go along that deal, and he got caught in the trap, was because Biden understood. He understands now. We all understand now that the real quid pro quo was for Donald Trump to become president if Vladimir Putin helped him, and his reward was not lifting the sanctions. That was out of Trump's control. And now that Biden is president, he can't lift the sanctions. And there are oligarchs all over Belgravia going back to Moscow because they no longer can make that kind of dough. The fact is that Afghanistan is mineral rich, and the Chinese and the Russians are just salivating to get their hands in there. And it seems, thanks to Donald Trump, they're able to do so. And poor judgment by Joe Biden. He fell for it, and he shouldn't have.
And indeed, the nature of the departure, that's the issue, isn't it, Jon-Christopher? Because
Yes.
some people think that a phased departure was inevitable, whoever was president. But the manner of this departure will reflect badly on the commander-in-chief.
Yes, indeed. And if I may say, it was rather bravura for Joe Biden, who I've known for years, and he's an honorable man. They said that about Caesar, right? I believe, or whatever. We'll quote it, Mark Antony later. But he was an honorable man. He still is. Thank you, Mark Antony. He was an honorable man. He still is an honorable man. But the fact is that he got duped. And he then went on with bravura to say, oh, we're going to be out by the 20th anniversary of the invasion of 9/11. I was there. I watched those towers come down. And that's a very emotional thing to say. But if the biggest fault from Joe Biden was that he went along with that and he fell for it, he fell over the tripwire, and then he used the 9/11 as an excuse to get out. And he was caught basically in a very difficult position.
The leader,
and if
Jon-Christopher,
TV,
the leader
yes.
of the free world, you've just openly admitted was duped. It's not a ringing endorsement, is it, of the president? I mean, is he fit for high office? Has he got the judgment to continue? Have we got to have 3 more years of being duped and making mistakes?
You know me enough to speak that I speak truth to power, and I would tell Joe Biden to his face, I like him. He's a good guy, but he took the bait. And his intelligence operations and his defense operations were not up to snuff, and he's suffering for it. Whether he will resign, he's not that kind of a guy. He's a tough guy from Pennsylvania. He's not going to resign, but he may try to uncover other things that need to be uncovered. And we have a real crisis in this country. As you remember, January 6th, we have a crisis, and we were attacked. Our government was under siege. And that needs to be uncovered, and we really need to get involved in that. You know, people forget quickly about Afghanistan. It's a shame. They're wonderful people, and they'll go on to the next thing. We've got the West is on fire, and there are states in this country where we have almost 700 million people dead from COVID. And I know you understand, and I must give credit to my Republican colleague, my counterpart, because I had his job when I was with the DNC. And he's a decent man, an honorable man himself, and he speaks very articulately. And I'm proud to be on the show with him.
So the root of this problem, notwithstanding all this flattery, Greg, is that Donald Trump did a deal with the Taliban, and we are now paying the price.
Yeah, and I think that's a false choice. You know, the president didn't have to roll over on that. You know, he's overturned American energy independence for the benefit of OPEC and for Putin and Russia, and then ended up later, of course, you know, after shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, begging OPEC to pump more oil. He opened the border, which was the border policy from President Trump was successful. You didn't have the humanitarian crisis at the border until Biden caused it. You know, these are things he overturned policies, you know, whether it's economic policy, border policy, energy policy. And look, we can have a different discussion about the merits of those policies. I think they were working, they were working. But you know, so to say that, you know, he was stuck with this policy and he's overturned everything that Trump did on purpose, just because it was Trump. And then he decided not to flip on this one. But again, also, as I said earlier, it's a false choice. I mean, he was advised by his military and foreign policy advisors to keep a force on the ground. He started with 2,500. That was working well. No Americans have been killed in the last 18 months. The Bagram Air Force Base was critical, and he shut that down overnight without letting the Afghan army, Afghan military know. So, look, there's a million things we can Monday morning quarterback, and I appreciate, John had some good comments, and I understand that, that this wasn't necessarily Biden's problem because it goes back 20 years. But he should. I wish that he had taken a little bit more responsibility and also followed some advice so he wouldn't turn this into the debacle that it's become.
Yes, and I wonder about the role of Obama, Greg, given the fact that President Obama declared victory over the Taliban in 2014.
Yeah, I know we've learned the hard way, and I think John would agree that declaring victory or declaring mission accomplished is always somewhat premature. So, look, I think that was a mistake, and Biden was quite critical of his predecessors. He didn't just single out Bush and Trump. He actually said the three prior presidents. So look, I mean, I think Obama made plenty of mistakes. I think Bush made plenty of mistakes. That's again, Monday morning quarterbacking is easy, but I think in the last month, this has turned into a complete debacle, and it didn't need to be. It could have been handled much more delicately. For a man who was who everybody talked about, especially on the left and in the media, how much empathy he had. He was the empathetic president, and yet he has no empathy for the people in Afghanistan who are suffering, and especially for the people that helped us and the British in Afghanistan, notably the interpreters and the military. I thought Tom Tugendhat did a fantastic job on was it Wednesday or Thursday with his speech, and I think everybody should watch that speech a few times.
Yes, is empathy missing from the White House operation, Jon-Christopher?
No, and I think that my counterpart here has certainly got his talking points from the RNC. I can tell exactly when he's talking about the border and this and that. Look, Donald Trump is the absolute worst president. He was impeached twice. He should be arrested and put in jail for what he's done. Joe Biden, and you're smiling, it's not funny because it will happen. And his team and his son and the rest of his family are basically criminals, and that will come to fruition.
There are sleeve allegations that surround the family of Joe Biden.
No, come on. Let's not conflate.
Russia,
Joe
China,
Biden,
Russia, China, and as well as Ukraine, all on the hook. I mean, this, all right. And hopefully this will all come out.
Can I say something?
Of course, John. Go ahead.
I'm going to take back what I said about you earlier, being a swell guest, but I will say this. Joe Biden, in fact, made a mistake in the way he reacted to the promise that he made the Afghan people and the Taliban that he would get out of there. And we know that. That was a serious mistake, and he will suffer for it. The fact is that the intelligence on the ground today, and you can see reporters like one of my favorite people, from a colleague from CNN, Clarissa Ward, who is showing exactly what's going on. And now I understand from the U.S. military that ISIS and Al Qaeda are back. You spelled my name wrong, but it's BUA, but we'll take care of that. Al Qaeda and ISIS are back, and that's exactly what we went in to take care of. Now, please don't forget, and I'm not overstressing this. Some people think I'm like crazy on Putin, but there's a big question here. What did Vladimir know, and when did he know it, and how involved has he been in bringing Trump back into the White House? And this way, Biden can't win, because he either loses on the PR front or that he loses in the election against Donald Trump if he's not, in fact, in prison.
Does this week and the events of this week, Greg, do they pave the way for Donald Trump's return to the White House in 3 years' time?
I'm not sure, Mark. And people have been asking me this, since January 19th, really, or since November 3rd. in many ways, I hope he doesn't come back to run again. If the election was tomorrow, he would win, obviously, because Biden is politically finished. But I think it's better for the party, it's better for the country for a younger Republican to come in who perhaps believes in the policies of Donald Trump, but not necessarily with some of the baggage, and the rhetoric and all the midnight tweets, et cetera. So, look, I think it'd be better for someone new to come in, someone younger. I think someone in their 40s or 50s, absolutely.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Sure. Yeah, no, he's a possibility, but a lot can happen in 2 years. Everybody's talking him up right now, and I like him, and he's done a great job. But I think
I'm glad you like Ron DeSantis, who is absolutely a devastating governor, who's prohibited masks and eliminated vaccines that the
for
school
children.
board. You're laughing again. The local school boards
because I think it's so hysterical that you keep
going
going
to go
back
against
to the
him
same
because
stuff.
he is a Donald Trump clone, and he feels if he can be that insane about COVID, that the extreme right wing lunatics will vote for him. And Florida,
the lifting of COVID restrictions, including the mask mandate many months ago, Jon-Christopher Bua, has been a triumph for Ron DeSantis. Florida in particular have a lower per capita death rate from COVID than California.
That's absolutely insane.
No, it's absolutely true.
Mark.
And I think, it's funny. Now, what's next? The Russia collusion hoax? I mean, John, you keep going back to the same things. But look, to answer Mark's question, I think that the debacle of Biden in the last week and month paves the way for the midterms in 22. I think the Republicans were going to sweep anyway in 22. But it definitely sets up a candidate in 2024. Whether it's Trump, I hope it's not. I hope it's someone else who's younger. And also, I hope it's
What's the problem, Greg? What's the problem with Trump? Why can't he go again in 3 years' time?
Well, no, I mean, he can.
Is it an age thing?
No,
He'll be 82. That's a nice young 40-year-old.
Look, he's slightly younger.
Only a number,
Biden.
Jon-Christopher.
He's much more energetic than Biden. But I also,
He'll be 82.
He can only run for one more term, and I think it would be better to have someone in for 8 years than for one term. And I think that's probably the challenge that President Biden is having right now. He obviously is not fit to run for a second term.
Jon-Christopher, the important aspect of this conversation is we're talking about the winner of the next presidential election, and we're expecting it to be a Republican.
As Macmillan said, events, dear boy, events. And we haven't even seen the outcome of what will happen after this week, and what else will come up, and what will be disclosed as we see exactly what the connections have been with the skullduggery maneuvers. And we'll see that, and history will get it out. The legacy will come out, and hopefully this time we will have another fair and free election in this country, and not one that Donald Trump says was phony and it was cheated and it was fake. So we'll see. It'll be coming up. Stand by. I know the Brits are a very, very important ally, and we'd like to know that you are still concerned about what happens in our country, because we're all together on this thing.
Do you think those midterm elections are bad news for the Democrats now, Jon-Christopher? Have you accepted that the Republicans will triumph?
Well, you've got a year, so a lot can happen in a year, and usually it is. I'm an adjunct professor at 2 universities, and I've always said, and we've always talked about the fact that an off-year election is never good for the winner of the White House. Greg's nodding; he agrees. So that's not a good thing.
Absolutely.
And then, but the other skullduggery is that they're trying to suppress the vote, and they're trying to keep people from voting, and that's why the John Lewis Act must go through, and that's why people must be free to vote. There must be mail-in ballots, etc. And if some Republicans, not all, are not happy with the result of an election, they'll just call it fake. It was stolen, and they'll try to suppress the vote through their own state legislatures. That's not America. That's not what this country is about, nor is it what Great Britain is about, I might add.
Greg, is the elephant in the room George W. Bush? Is he responsible for this whole mess in Afghanistan?
Well, look, if you go back historically, obviously he's the president who got this whole thing started. But I would remind everyone that, the viewers, that when he did this in 2001, first of all, the idea originally was to go in, get Al Qaeda, and terminate their ability to wage war on the West through terrorism. And that was accomplished pretty quickly. That was done actually by December of 2001. So I think the mission changed. There was mission creep. But remember too that Bush had support from both sides of the aisle for the invasion of Afghanistan. Massive Western support. NATO, actually, after 9/11, NATO pulled the trigger and said, yes, we will defend, one of our NATO allies. So it's apples and oranges. It's a long time ago, but I of course, you have to point to President Bush because he was president at the time, and he's the one who initially launched the campaign. But again, it was with really bipartisan support at the time. And that of course changed over the years. So there's no doubt that by the time he left the White House, by 2006 for that matter, there was little appetite for both wars that were going.
And of course, it's often forgotten that Joe Biden campaigned for the Iraq War. So it's very interesting to look at the political CV of all of these figures. Final question to both of you, starting with you, Greg. Has this campaign in Afghanistan over 2 decades been worth it?
Tough one. I mean, look, I'd like to say yes, because it was the right motives, it was the right incentives to go in. Surely at the beginning, the initial or the original focus on destroying Al Qaeda and destroying the capability of providing safe harbor for bin Laden and the other terrorists. But over time, yeah, I think it's a different topic, but I think it's hard to argue that staying there indefinitely was the right move. But I would argue that because of the sacrifice of all these great men and women from both the U.S. and the U.K. as well as our NATO allies, that the withdrawal was a complete disaster. I think you can have different conversations about how long we should have stayed, whether it was too long. But by all means, the people of Afghanistan deserve better than this. And I think that the allies of the United States deserve better than this.
Jon-Christopher Bua, was it worth it?
I guess you'd have to go and see a terrific movie with Tom Hanks, directed by Mike Nichols, called Charlie Wilson's War. We can go back in time and look and see what went on there, and we can take it from there. Mission accomplished. You name it, all the cliches, all that you want. But the exit was too fast. It wasn't well thought. But I think that we must show strength in this country and resolve to make sure that Al Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban do not make this a stronghold for viciousness, where young girls are thrown into to God knows what life conditions, and women have been curtailed from their education. And if you don't have a beard, you're beheaded. And all we need to see is horrible events. And there are people who are ready to make these videos of people being slaughtered and saying, okay, Joe Biden, you're responsible for this. It's not a good situation. My heart is broken. The American people's heart is broken. We are feeling very, very bad right now. We want our country to pull together. We want our president to pull together, and we want the best for the world. And and always remember, China and Russia are standing by, ready to take those minerals away from Afghanistan. And I think that is a number one issue that we all have to deal with. I hope Greg agrees with me. And Mark, yeah. I always enjoy being on your show.
Well, we love having you on the show, both of you. A fantastic contribution, a very balanced debate.